Ryan Preece and Joe Logano were disqualified from the NASCAR Cup Series race at Talladega Superspeedway, and Cleetus McFarland finishes top 10 in the ARCA race at Talladega and could make his NASCAR debut at some point in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports story discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. We're first going to take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brandon Jones' 2025 Amdro Pest Control scheme that we'll see this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. I think this scheme actually looks really good. I think Tricon's nailed a lot of their schemes. This one's no exception. It does look good. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Matt Mills' 2025 Ross Chastain throwback scheme that we'll see this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. This throwback to Ross Chastain's win at Gateway. I think this actually looks really good. I think Nice Motorsports absolutely knocked this one out of the park. It looks very solid. They did a really good job on this one. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Texas. It looks really awesome and looks really good. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hendrick Motorsports. As it was reported by NASCAR Insights, aka Trey Ryan, the Hendrick Motorsports had all four cars finish inside the top 10 at Talladega Superspeedway. This is only the second time in their history that they finished in the top 10 for all four of their cars. The last time it happened was in the spring race in 2011 when all four cars are battling for the win and checker flag, and Jimmie Johnson won in one of the closest finishes in NASCAR Cup Series history. It's a big accomplishment for Hendrick. They usually involve a lot of crashes at this track, but I think it's a pretty big deal for all four cars to finish inside the top 10. It's a massive accomplishment for the team. Congratulations to all four drivers on being able to finish inside the top 10. They all finished inside the top 7, as a matter of fact. Congrats to them on being able to get that done. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jesse Love. Now, we do have a couple Jesse Love topics to talk about today on the channel. The first one revolves around his pole at Talladega. As reported by Trey Ryan, aka NASCAR Insights, that with Jesse Love winning the pole for the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Talladega Superspeedway, he is the first driver to win 4 consecutive poles on drafting tracks in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. That is a massive accomplishment. We know, of course, that the RCR cars at Superspeedways, they're very fast and very strong, and they're usually very tough to beat at these types of tracks. So I think it's a really massive deal to see Jesse Love continue to break some records. He's also been very good at Superspeedway tracks, been really strong throughout the years, and I think it's a big deal for him to get another pole at Talladega Superspeedway. So congratulations to him on breaking his own record and the record for Xfinity. Congrats to him on getting another drafting pole in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, on Friday night before the NASCAR Cup Series race took place on Sunday, Kyle Larson was competing in the World of Outlaws race at Jacksonville. And once again, no shock and surprise, Kyle Larson would go to that race and pick up another win in the World of Outlaws and won the race at Jacksonville. I believe this is Kyle Larson's 38th or 39th career World of Outlaws victory and continues to move up on the all-time win list in the World of Outlaws. It doesn't matter what type of car racetrack that Larson goes to. He's going to be one of the favorites going into these events. Of course, he finished second in the NASCAR Cup Series race at Talladega Superspeedway earlier today, but I think Larson is just really good at dirt racing. He's one of the best drivers in the world, and he continues to put up fantastic numbers in this series, and to win another World of Outlaws race, that is pretty incredible. Congratulations to Kyle Larson on winning another World of Outlaws race at Jacksonville Speedway, a well-deserved win for him as he got it at the end of the event. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Talladega Cup race. Now, we're going to talk about Superspeedway racing near the end of this episode, but first revolves around the Talladega Cup race. As reported by Trey Ryan, aka NASCAR Insights, that the Cup race at Talladega, the Jack Links 500, ended on a 62-lap green flag run. This is the longest green run to end a Superspeedway race since the 2004 Pepsi 400 that Jeff Gordon won, which was a C2 race with all the Coca-Cola cars. That is absolutely wild. Usually when you look at Superspeedway races, we always have a lot of big wrecks, especially at the end. But everyone really kept their nose clean. I get the race wasn't fantastic overall, but say what you want to say, that is a massive accomplishment for NASCAR Cup competition. Because a lot of these Superspeedway races turn to complete chaos, and there's a lot of crashes that end up taking place. So I think that is a massive deal, all things considered. I get the racing wasn't overall the most fantastic today, but I think it's a pretty incredible deal to see that the Talladega Cup race from earlier today broke another record on that front. Congratulations to them on keeping their noses clean and not causing big wrecks at the end of the event. That's a massive and pretty big positive from the Cup race earlier today. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson once again. As was reported by Jeff Gluck earlier tonight during the NASCAR Cup Series race at Talladega, that with Kyle Larson winning stage number 1 at Talladega Superspeedway, he has officially now won the most stages in the stage era in NASCAR Cup Series history. Coming in today's race at Talladega Superspeedway, Kyle Larson was tied with Mark Truex Jr. for the most stage wins of all time, which I believe he had 67, which both of them did. But with Kyle Larson winning stage number 1 earlier today, he has officially broke that record. Kyle Larson, we know, is fantastic in the stage era. He won a lot of stages in 2017, of course, won some in 2018, and of course, since joining Hendrick Motorsports, he's been on a different level at these types since the stage era officially begun. I think it's a big deal for Larson to now have it. I think he will likely be the first driver in NASCAR history to reach 100 stage wins, unless, of course, NASCAR does get rid of stage racing, which I don't think they're going to, and he could break it by the end of 2026 or 2027. So a big deal for Larson. I think he's also close, if you look at all the series combined, of getting all 3 series having over 100 stage wins combined. So congratulations to Larson on breaking that record. A big deal for him to have the most stage wins in Cup history. A really massive deal for him, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR. Now, we're going to talk about Cleetus McFarland near the end of the episode. But earlier today, it was reported by Adam Stern that the NASCAR YouTube channel gained 20,000 to 30,000 new subscribers on YouTube yesterday. The reason it gained 20,000 to 30,000 subscribers is because of Cleetus McFarland. We all know Cleetus McFarland competed in the ARCA race at Talladega Superspeedway, and they had an onboard camera with Cleetus McFarland on the YouTube page, which was being streamed. And you take a look at the numbers, if I'm not mistaken, the stream that they had for his onboard camera, it had over 70,000 viewers on there. For someone as popular as Cleetus McFarland and for an ARCA race, that is a really, really big deal because ARCA, while it is still a very popular series, it is not as popular as like the Xfinity series or the Truck series or even the Cup series at this point. But Cleetus McFarland brings a lot of eyes to the table, and I have to think even for a race on FS1, that number is probably going to be a lot higher because of Cleetus being in the race. To me, I think that is a huge deal that they gained so many subscribers on YouTube. Their YouTube page has been growing. They've been hiring people as of recently to try to get the numbers up, which I can't blame them for that. But I think it's a big deal to have a big number like that in this series. Congrats to NASCAR on getting more and more subscribers at 20,000 to 30,000. I think they're going to gain a lot more subscribers as time goes on. And I think if you're NASCAR, you better do that for Bristol when Cleetus races because he's a really big deal in this series, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Isabelle RobustO. Now, Isabelle RobustO, of course, competes full-time in the ARCA series, and she had a very strong race in the ARCA race at Talladega. She ran very, very well, ran up front the whole entire event, and she actually crossed the finish line and finished 3rd place in the Talladega race. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, as reported, I think by Jeff Gluck and a couple people as well, she is the highest finishing female in NASCAR or motorsports history in general at finishing up front at Talladega Superspeedway. I thought she was going to have a chance and opportunity to go out there and beat Wallace Allen, who ended up picking up the win. But she did a very awesome job in this race. She was in the lead pack the whole entire event. She ran top 5 pretty much the whole entire race. And this is about the closest we've seen her going to victory lane in the main ARCA series. She had that really good run at Phoenix last year, but of course the rain came and she didn't get a chance to go out there and pick up the win. But I think that she did an absolute fantastic and very, very good job in the ARCA event. And yes, she didn't pick up the win, but she should be really proud of herself. And I think that when you look at female drivers, we haven't seen a lot of female drivers have success in motorsports. I think about Tony Breidinger, who's on her way up right now, though she's been struggling in trucks. Haley Deegan, who was on her way up. She, of course, won some ARCA West races, but she floundered and left NASCAR about at the end of last year, though she could come back in the future, maybe down the road. And then you got other drivers who tried to make it. But I think of all drivers in the motorsports sphere right now who I think have a chance and opportunity to really do good, I think Isabelle is someone who could really go to that next big level. So congratulations on a fantastic run for Isabella. I think she is going to be someone that is going to be very fantastic. And I think there's a really good chance and possibility that by the end of this year, she could pick up her first win. We'll see if she does. I think she did a fantastic job earlier this weekend in the ARCA race at Talladega. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tony Stewart. Now, Tony Stewart, of course, competes in the NHRA full-time currently at the moment. And earlier tonight, he actually won his second straight 4-wide Nationals victory at Charlotte Motor Speedway at the Charlotte Z-Max Dragway. So congratulations to Tony Stewart on getting that done. But during media availability, shout out to Taylor Kitchen, a fellow reporter in the industry, she was able to get this on video, but Tony Stewart basically invited Dale Jr. to run in the NHRA. Now, why is this happening? Well, Dale Jr., of course, was doing some stuff with Cleetus McFarland on his YouTube page a couple days ago, and he had a drag truck with the number 3 for the Intimidator colors. And that caught a lot of attention in the industry. And Tony Stewart basically is asking Dale Jr. if he wants to do it. Now, Dale Jr. was interviewed, I believe, by Buddy Poley. He's a part of the ATYL network, I'm pretty sure. And he asked Dale Jr. about this possibility during the Cars Tour race earlier this weekend in Orange County. Dale Jr. is not completely declining the opportunity. It seems like he might be actually a little bit interested in maybe doing something like this. I think it'd be really awesome, in all honesty, if Dale Jr. got to do some NHRA stuff and maybe got Cleetus McFarland involved as well. Dale Jr. has never done NHRA competition, but I think he honestly could do a very, very good job. We've seen Tony Stewart be able to be very, very accomplished. He's won a couple races now at this point in the top league. So why not bring him down and give him a chance and opportunity to see what he has got? I would love to see Tony Stewart bring Dale Jr. in, race maybe in the top leagues or one of the lower leagues, maybe like the stock division perhaps. I think that'd be really, really cool if that could happen. So I hope it does happen. I want to see Dale Jr. get involved in the NHRA. The viewership would go up because a lot of the NASCAR fans are definitely tuning in the NHRA, which is still on Fox. I think it should happen. I hope it does happen, and I think it'd be really cool if we got to see Dale Jr. get the chance and opportunity to compete in the NHRA in some way, shape, or form, made for some sort of exhibition they do. I think that'd be something that we could definitely be fun, and I hope it does happen where we see Dale Jr. get the chance to compete in the NHRA in some way, shape, or form. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Earnhardt documentary. As it was officially confirmed on Friday afternoon that the premiere date has been officially finalized for when the Earnhardt documentary is going to be released. It was announced on Friday that there will be 4 parts to this documentary, and the first 2 episodes are going to premiere on May 22nd during the Memorial Day weekend. The first part is going to be the rise of Dale Sr. on his way up racing for smaller teams. The second video is going to be the rise of the Intimidator. The third episode is going to be about Dale Sr. being the top of the chain. And then the 4th episode will be around the 2001 Daytona 500. This is going to be the first documentary that is going to be officially coming out since NASCAR has come in. They're going to be having a Kyle Larson documentary that's going to be coming out sometime in 2026, around his run in 2024 and 2025, run the Indy 500 and the Coca-Cola 600. And of course, we do have another documentary that's going to be coming out in June this year that revolves around Le Mans, with NASCAR going to Le Mans a couple years ago with the Garage 56 entry. I think we all kind of talk about Earnhardt documentaries. I am very intrigued to see what new information is going to come out, because we all know a lot of stuff about Dale Sr., and I know M. Lemon did a fantastic video on Dale Sr. a couple years ago, and that got a lot of views on YouTube as well. So I'm very intrigued to see what new information is going to come out in regards to this. To me, I think it's certainly going to be interesting. I'll give you that. And I think having a documentary around Earnhardt is certainly interesting. But I also love the fact that Amazon is doing the new documentaries and some of the new stuff going on in the sport as well. Like Kyle Larson running the Indy 500, who I think has a really good chance and opportunity to really grow the sport in a big way. And I also think there's a lot of opportunities here to grow the sport as well. So I think it's certainly interesting for sure, and kind of a big deal to see the Earnhardt documentary has finally got a release date, and we're finally being able to get the release date for that. Pretty awesome stuff, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about William Sawalich. Now, we have talked about William Sawalich quite a bit on this channel over the course of the last couple weeks. And the big reason we talk about William Sawalich quite a bit in recent weeks is because of the bad and terrible performances over the course of the last 7 or 8 weeks. So in the first 3 races of the season, William Sawalich had a couple really good runs. He actually had a couple top 10 finishes to start the year, and I believe he had a 10.6 or 10.7 average finish. But in the last 7 races, William Sawalich has completely plummeted. His bad season continued after unfortunately getting involved involved in a situation where the engine let go near the end of the event, which is a tough break because William was doing a fantastic and really good job at Talladega in the Xfinity Series. But unfortunately, because of him having his issues at Talladega, he unfortunately finished outside the top 20 once again, and he has now had 7 straight finishes outside of the top 20 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and is sitting 27th in the regular season standings. In fact, he has not finished better than 24th in the last 7 races. I feel bad for William in this situation, what happened at Talladega, because I think William Sawalich is definitely a talented race car driver, but I said this going into this year. I didn't think he was going to be a factor to make the playoffs in 2025 because he was getting rushed up. I don't think he was ready in any way, shape, or form to move up to Xfinity. So I think he should have waited another year or so, got some truck starts, and maybe got some Xfinity Series starts this year. But I think that Joe Gibbs Racing made a terrible decision to try to jump him up really quickly in Xfinity because, like I've already mentioned, I don't think he was ready. He's been struggling this year immensely. Numbers like that got Hailie Deegan fired from Xfinity. She was not good, I'll give you that, but Sawalich is running about as bad as Hailie Deegan did and running about as Brad Keselowski has throughout the year in Cup. So I really, so SVG as well, but I think there's got to be a turnaround happening soon because there's going to have to be some conversations had. I get his father's bringing sponsorship and funding to the table. We've got to have some conversations had soon because right now his performance has not been good. It's been dreadful, and it's been unacceptable for Sanders in a Joe Gibbs Racing car, and just a horrible and bad season continues for William Sawalich in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jesse Love once again. Now, we obviously know that Jesse Love got disqualified from the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Rockingham Speedway. And the reason Jesse Love got disqualified is because something in the rear trailing arm, in the trailing arm mount, where those parts were not meshing together and they were not sticking together like they're supposed to and supposed to have contact with each other. RCR, of course, did appeal that disqualification earlier this week, but unfortunately on Wednesday it was announced in the middle of the afternoon that Jesse Love had lost his disqualification appeal. Now, earlier this weekend, before cars got on track on Friday for qualifying, Eric Peterson, who is the director for the NASCAR Xfinity Series, actually revealed the reason for disqualification and actually showed the part that had been confiscated and showed that the parts were not meshing together. One thing I like about the new NASCAR lease, even though I don't like some things about NASCAR right now, one thing I love is the fact that they are showing the confiscated parts. For a long time, we never got that transparency in regards to a lot of these disqualifications and penalties as well. They were a very closed book about this, but in recent years, especially since the next-gen car came into play about 3 or 4 years ago, that's actually been one positive, I would say, with the next-gen car. Unlike a lot of negatives that the next-gen car has had, I think this actually has been a big positive because we can see the parts. As you probably have seen, the parts were not meshing together. I think NASCAR did make the right call here to go ahead and DQ him. And again, it could be something where they weren't cheating, and people would definitely say that they probably weren't cheating in this situation, but you don't know if they are or not. That's why NASCAR and the people in the appeals panel, which is independent by the way, that's why they upheld the decision to disqualify. I get for Jesse Love because he's not the one that works on the car. He's keeping the trophy, it sounds like, which I think is really, really funny. But I think for Jesse Love, it's just focus going forward. He had a great run at Talladega, finished inside the top 5, finished in 3rd place. So overall did a really fantastic and great job. But to me, I think NASCAR got the call right. It's unfortunate, I know, for Jesse Love, but I think if they can show that, and again, you can look at the photo, and you probably saw the photo as well, and you can tell, yeah, they definitely were messing with that. They probably were cheating or doing something. Again, we don't really exactly know for sure, but to me, when I looked at it and saw the part that was out there, it looked to me like there might have been some meddling that was going on with it, and I think that's why they got disqualified, because it's been something we've been seeing. We've seen a lot of disqualifications so far this year, and I think they absolutely got the call right in regards to that situation, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mike Joy. Now, Mike Joy earlier this week was on the Happy Harvick podcast on Thursday. They talked about a lot of things. They talked about the fact that maybe wanted Chris Bell to run the Indianapolis 500 down the road and talk about how Chris Bell is going to be a Cup Series champion one day. But one thing that got talked about was the lack of growth in NASCAR in regards to the younger youth. And Mike Joy kind of talked about this with Kevin Harvick. Mike Joy says and spoke on the lack of growth with the younger fans. And one thing that he mentioned was the business to business and not the business to consumer brands. He says there's been a lot less activation in NASCAR, and he says that's one of the reasons why we have not seen a lot of growth in the sport. And that's one thing he wants to see come back, is more of the business to consumer brands. We do have that with Busch Beer, we do have that with Wendy's, we do have that with McDonald's, we have that with some of the companies as well. But when you think about a lot of these companies like HendrickCars.com, that's more of a B2B situation, even though that's business to consumer, because you actually can go on that website and order cars. But there's not as many of those there's a lot more B2B brands. And I think we've been seeing a lot less activation at the racetrack. When I went to Gateway Cup about a year or so ago, I did see a lot of activation. But when I went there a year or so ago, I was thinking there definitely could have been a lot more activation at this track. I think activation is going to be key with the sponsors, and the sponsors are going to have to get involved a lot more than they are currently at the moment. And unfortunately, the younger crowd doesn't know as much about NASCAR nowadays, and he's absolutely right that we do need a younger fan base to come in. But it's not just that. The TV broadcast, which we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit, I think that's another big factor to the younger crowd. Look at Formula One, for example. Their TV product has been really good because Sky Sports does a TV broadcast and they don't have any full-screen commercials. And I think that's one thing that definitely could help with a lot of these issues as well, is fixing that. To me, I think that's going to be a big factor too, is getting the racing product to be better. I think that's one thing will get fans a lot more interested. But I also do think as well, you got to look at some of the other outside factors as well to why we've been seeing less fans, especially at a younger age, younger than me, for example, coming in, because you need that younger fan base. The sport is getting a lot older currently at the moment. And I do think there's a lot of things that need to happen in order for things to kind of take place. We'll see what happens down the road, but I do agree that there has to be better stuff happening for the sport to grow if the sport wants to get in a better position long term. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Katherine Legge and Aric Almirola. So, during the end of the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, there was an incident that happened around 10 or 11 laps ago between Aric Almirola and Katherine Legge. Aric Almirola had been up front quite a bit early in this race, and Katherine Legge, while she'd been quietly having a quiet day in the back of the field with how fast the Jordan Anderson racing cars were, she was charging her way up to the front. Coming down the back straight with around 11 laps to go, Aric Almirola was told by a spotter that he was clear for second. He would go way up the racetrack, potentially clear himself, and would get right in front of Katherine Legge. He forces right in front of her. He turns in the outside wall. Katherine Legge gets collected, and Jeffrey Earnhardt and Brandon Jones are collected in the incident as well. Aric Almirola is not very happy with his spotter, Stevie Rees. He's like, hey, you told me I was clear. And his spotter said, I told you you're clear for a second, bud, but you weren't fully entirely clear. And during the media availabilities after that situation that concluded, Katherine Legge was a little bit frustrated that she got taken out of the crash, but she did say she had a lot of fun during the race. Aric Almirola actually took responsibility for the incident on track, said that Katherine Legge did nothing wrong, it was entirely my fault, and I take responsibility for the crash and incident. One, it takes cojones for a driver to admit that they're right in a situation or in the wrong for what exactly happened there, because to me, the situation is very, very clear. Katherine Legge did nothing wrong. She was running a very good race. She led laps because of green flag pit stops, which I think that's really impressive. But she also was doing a really good job in this race, keeping her nose clean, making the correct moves, and learning the draft as well, especially after 2 straight weeks of a lot of backlash she received with some of the issues on track. But today, or Saturday, she did nothing wrong. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people are going to send hate toward her. Now, I will say in this wreck, I saw a lot more people actually defending Katherine Legge than actually were going after, which I'm glad to see at least people had some common sense to not blame Katherine for that wreck. Because like I said, Aric Almirola, who I expect a lot better from on Superspeedways, he just made a really, really bad move and a major misjudgment and took out a couple other cars too, like Brandon Jones, who had a really good run going, and Jeffrey Earnhardt, who was actually running inside the top 10, top 15 in quite a bit of this race. Again, it was not intentional. It was just a mistake on Aric Almirola's part, but that was all on Aric Almirola, unfortunately. And he took out his teammate, too, which is really unfortunate. There's just, Aric knows a lot better. This is now the second time Almirola's kind of caused controversy and incident. I thought what happened in Phoenix was kind of fair racing, but in this case, in this situation, that was just a bad move on Aric Almirola's part. But stuff like that is going to happen from time to time. You're going to have incidents like this from time to time where wrecks are going to take place and issues are going to happen on track. But to me, that is unfortunately on Aric for causing that wreck at Talladega, and glad to see a lot of people are blaming Aric for the wreck instead of Katherine Legge. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Artie Kempner. As it was confirmed by Bob Pockrass earlier today that today's NASCAR Cup Series race at Talladega Superspeedway was the last race for Artie Kempner as director for Fox. Artie Kempner has been a director for 31 years at Fox and has been involved in NASCAR's on Fox's coverage since 2001 when, of course, NASCAR joined the Fox family in 2001. Artie Kempner, we all know, of course, will be leaving Fox effective immediately as he's going to be starting to focus on working on Monday Night Football coverage on ESPN as he will reunite with Joe Buck and also Troy Aikman on ESPN as well. Obviously, this is a really big deal because he had some people that were thanking Artie Kempner, which I will say, Artie Kempner does have a really strong resume for many years. He covered 23 Daytona 500s, and he covered a lot of big events across sports as well. And I think there's a lot of respect toward him on that part as well. However, I think he's been one of the big reasons why Fox's coverage has gotten stale and the quality has gone down. I'm not going to discredit all the stuff he did for a very long time because what he did for a long time was actually really, really good. But really for the last 5 to 6 years in particular, the quality of coverage for Fox's coverage on the NASCAR side has just not been very, very good. And we saw it even earlier today as well. We threw a commercial, a side-by-side commercial with 9 laps to go in the Cup race at Talladega, which really ruined the energy of that. We have seen a lot of times where they throw commercials very late in the races. I get thrown a commercial with 15 laps to go, but a commercial with 9 to go in the race, that is just ridiculous. And this race, in my opinion, was way over commercialized. So I'm really hoping with Artie Kempner being gone, and I think I have respect for Artie Kempner for a lot he's done. I get it's a very stressful position, but for Artie Kempner, with him being gone, I really hope these broadcasts can improve and get better. Because personally, I think the coverage right now on Fox has just been unacceptable for a very long time. And today, it just was overall bad. So many commercials, so many side-by-side. There were like 4 or 5 side-by-side commercials by lap 30 or 40 of the event. I'll give them credit, a lot of side-by-side, but still way too many commercials. They probably planned for some big ones, and we never got a big one in this race today. We got some small wrecks, but never a big crash that took place. But to me, I just think there's got to be some major changes happening at Fox. I hope whoever's going in can be better. I do worry that the broadcasts in general are going to end up getting worse with Artie Kempner being gone. So I just don't think it's an Artie Kempner issue. I think it's an all-around Fox issue that needs to be resolved. All the coverage across every platform except IndyCar right now they own is terrible right now. So I think if Artie's gone, we hope we can get better products, but honestly, I'm not expecting it to improve. I think it's still going to be some pretty lackluster products from the Fox side going forward. I hope it does get better, but personally, I don't think it's going to get better on Fox's front going forward. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Zilisch. Now we're once again talking about the NASCAR Xfinity Series race from Talladega Superspeedway. So Connor Zilisch, with a few laps to go in this race, actually had control of this event. He was leading the 2 RCR cars behind him of Jesse Love and Austin Hill, and also Jeff Byrne was up there as well battling for the lead. I believe Brandon Jones and even Justin Allgaier were battling for the lead as well. As it came to the white flag of the event, Connor Zilisch had the advantage, but Jeff Burton got this massive run coming off of turn number 4 and made a big run to the inside, and they were battling side by side going into turn number 1. But Jeff did not have the momentum, and Connor got a great push from Jesse Love and got the race lead back. But going down the back straightaway, Connor Zilisch will get a couple really big pushes from Jesse Love. Of course, you can't lock bumpers in this car. He would continue to get some really massive and really big pushes down the back straightaway. And Connor would go down a little bit. Jesse Love would come up a little bit. And coming down the back straightaway, Connor Zilisch would unintentionally get turned by him and spin really hard in the inside wall. This would bring out the caution because of the hit. And they would have to go to the replay, and it would last for about a minute or two where they have to go to the replay. And of course, they went ahead and threw the caution there, and they declared Austin Hill the winner because when they were at the replay center, you can actually take a look at it, and it looks really close. And I originally thought maybe Burton had won the race, but after looking at the replays, it's pretty clear as day that the winner of the race was Austin Hill. Now, obviously, there was a lot of controversy around this, but I'll talk about that in a second. First of all, Connor Zilisch was complaining on the radio that his back was hurting, but he did get taken out of the car, went to the infield care center. The big news is that Jesse Love actually went over there to talk to Connor. He felt terrible for wrecking his best friend, which of course they have a really good friendship if you look at their social media. But the big thing is that Connor Zilisch was okay. He was complaining about pain in his back. He said he's going to go to the doctor. He should be good to go for Texas this week, which is good. But I'm glad to see Connor Zilisch is okay. And it shows that they have a really good friendship. And I think the incident was unintentional. It was not intentional what happened there. It was just an accident. It was just a mistake there by Jesla, but also Connor was putting some blocks on there. So I think some blame does go to Connor for putting some blocks there. But obviously the big controversy is throwing the caution when they did. And I think a lot of people are asking, should have they thrown the caution? Now, in a lot of cases, I would say no. They should have let him race back to the line. And in most cases, I would agree with most people saying they should have let him race back to the line. However, I think in this case, they actually got the call right, and here's why. Connor Zilisch, like I mentioned, was on the radio complaining that his back was hurting. And I think in those cases, you got to get the medical team out there to make sure he's okay. And according to what I have heard, they cannot bring that medical team out until the caution comes out. I know what they said in Atlanta, but I think a lot of things are different than what happened at Atlanta. And to be fair, say what you want to say, they actually were consistent here. You go back to Atlanta, they threw the caution on the white flag of the race. So at least you can say NASCAR is being a little bit consistent. Don't get me wrong. I want to see a green flag finish to the checker flag. I think we all want to, even if there's like a one-car incident. But I think in this case and situation, as much as I hate when NASCAR has to make those ball and strike calls, I think in this case and situation, unfortunately, I think NASCAR made the right call. And again, I get why the fans are upset about it, but to me, I think NASCAR got the call right. I get why fans are upset once again, but I think NASCAR did make the right call in this situation. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Spire Motorsports. Now, we obviously know that the big story of last week was the fact that it was announced on Wednesday, shockingly, that Ronnie Childers and Spire Motorsports have parted ways effective immediately, and Ronnie Childers is no longer the crew chief for Justin Haley and no longer working as one of the higher-ups at Spire Motorsports. And a lot of people like myself were very, very shocked about the situation, and were wondering why the decision was made for that to happen. So it all started from some articles from Jeff Gluck earlier this week, where Jeff Gluck actually caught up with Jeff Dickerson, who's the president of Spire Motorsports and one of the co-owners of Spire Motorsports, and he says that one of the reasons why the decision was made with Ronnie Childers and them to split up, one of the reasons they made the decision is because, according to them, the energy was off. Now, Ronnie Childers also did respond as well to why he got fired. He actually said things were not working out very, very well, and he feels like that it was a Spire Motorsports decision to break up the duo. The fact that it's a Spire Motorsports decision to break this up is absolutely wild. And I really don't understand where the energy of his off comments are coming from Jeff Dickerson. Because in my opinion, while yes, Justin Haley and Ronnie Childers were not up there contending for a playoff spot at the time, they were having some really good runs. And you look at Spire Motorsports, for example. Spire Motorsports has actually been very, very good since Ronnie Childers has gotten there. You look at their performance. Their performance has been on an uptick swing. And I think they've been doing a really, really good job. I guess maybe things weren't working as well in their favor, but I think you have to give these times a little drivers and teams a little bit of opportunity to gel. And I get if you want to make the decision, do it early in the season so you get everything prepared. But at the same time, if you got the opportunity and chance to keep these two working together, you've got to give them that chance and opportunity to really gel and get that legacy together and potentialness of things. I get that Ronnie Childers has not been as strong in the next-gen era and in the next-gen car for that matter, but I think that they should have been given that chance and opportunity to really work together to have that potential success, because I do actually believe that if they had been able to work together and get through the remainder of the year, I think there could have been a lot of that success that everyone's really looking for over at Spire Motorsports. I'm not sure how this team is going to end up feeling. Now, Justin Haley did respond also on Saturday to the decision that was made, and he says that he was not part of the decision, which I think is weird. He said he went into the meeting, I believe, on Wednesday or Tuesday and said that this is something that's going to be happening. Justin kind of accepted that this was something that was going to be going down. He wasn't too thrilled about it, sounded like, but he said that he understood why they made the decision. It seems like Spire, and according to Carson Nospar as well, this is something that apparently been in the works for a very long time, and this is something that was probably going to happen at some point. It is really disappointing. I think that, to me, I felt like this is more of a Ronnie Childers decision, right? Because he lost his pit crew that went over to Kyle Larson. He lost his car chief that he worked at for 10 plus years since Kevin Harvick got to RCR. He was the car chief for that number 4 car. And obviously there was a lot of success with that duo working together. But Cheddar Smith went to work over with Ty Gibbs, starting, I believe, at Darlington or Martinsville, and look at the success that Ty Gibbs had. Granted, he finished outside the top 10 today, but he's generally ran a lot better and gotten some stage points since getting over there with Ty. So I do believe that while it's a frustrating decision, and I do wish that they would have been able to work together and gel together, sometimes some decisions are made, but I do wish they would have gotten the opportunity to kind of continue working together and try to continue having a lot of that success they've had. They were running really well. They ran really well at Bristol. Justin Haley, of course, got some points throughout the event. To me, I get the frustration of not having success instantly, but Spire Motorsports is a team that's still on the up and up, and I think that some of the comments are interesting to me. I wonder if Ronnie Chose will come back. We're not even sure when Ronnie will be going, if he'll ever come back, but I think some of the responses from the team are a little shocking and very, very interesting, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Katherine Legge once again. Now, we've kind of touched on this story a little bit earlier this week, but earlier this weekend on Saturday, Adam Stern basically put out an article from CNN in regards to Katherine Legge. And Katherine Legge did reveal to CNN and many other places in the motorsports world and in the news world as well. She revealed that she has received a lot of hurtful messages, thousands of hurtful messages on social media since it was announced that she was going to be running the race at Phoenix in the Cup race in March. And she's also received death threats, she's received a lot of sexist comments, and she's also received a lot more hateful messages in the last couple of months as well. She's generally tried to brush it off, it sounds like, but she's not been a big fan of receiving a lot of these hurtful comments. Now, I kind of talked about this on the channel, and I'm going to touch on this once again. Look, Katherine Legge has not had the best transition over to NASCAR at this time. I think we all kind of understand it. What happened at Phoenix earlier this year in March, that unfortunately was a little bit on the team not being prepared for. I think originally they were going to run the race as Circuit of the Americas, but they were not able to get the sponsorship in place for that to take place and everything to kind of go through. So that's why everything kind of fell and didn't really work out. Then she, of course, ended up spinning out, and that was her fault immediately. She spun out lap number 4, and then she ran in front of Daniel Suarez, who was having one of the best runs he had at that point all year. And he did not really blame her for the situation they had to call. He blamed NASCAR a lot more for approving her for that race. Then we go a few months later to Rockingham, and of course we have the situation that happens there where William Sawalich runs in the back of her. We have a situation where she, of course, buys a ride, which she would have qualified if we were going off of speed, and if we weren't going off of owner's points at the time. And then, of course, Katherine kind of blamed William Sawalich for the incident, which I think the incident is more on William because William ran into the back of her, but Casey Kane got collected. A lot of people had blamed her for the incident. I go back to the situation Eric Almirola, right? I think that case, a lot of people defended her, but I've seen a lot of people going after Katherine Legge. If you want to critique her and criticize her for her performance on the racetrack, I think that is perfectly fine, and I think that is actually understandable. However, going after her and being sexist, sending her death threats like some people have, that is just unacceptable and unexcusable, and people need to be better, and people need to do better. I get not liking Katherine Legge. I get that you don't like and respect her. I completely understand that. But at the same token, in the same time, I think people need to be better. We've seen this not just with Katherine Legge. We've seen this with other individuals. Marta Garcia, during, I believe, a European Le Mans event, I believe, earlier this year. She had a very, very bad crash. She wasn't even at fault for it, and yet people were sending death threats to her. I've seen other people get death threats. When Agustin Canapino in IndyCar basically kind of caused an incident, I believe at Laguna Seca 2 years ago, with his teammate Callum Ilott, guess what? People were instantly blaming Callum Ilott from Argentina, and they were sending death threats to Callum Ilott. And then, of course, we had a situation with Teo Pocher, which kind of sparked the situation that kind of forced Agustin Canapino to get out of IndyCar and hasn't been back in IndyCar since because of that situation. So I think that people just need to be better, and they need to be better humans. And I think there's a lot of people that think social media is just going to keep it because people use social media as a way to be anonymous. And to me, I think with Katherine Legge, I get people not liking her, right? But I think you don't have to send hurtful comments to somebody and just be disrespectful. I think it's just inexcusable, and I think people need to be better on social media. The problem is it's very easy to get on social media and express the way you feel about situations, and I think people can definitely do a better job of being more representative, of being better. I think we all need to do a better job, and I think more people need to call this kind of stuff out because I think that this kind of stuff is just unexcusable, uncalled for, and I really hope for Katherine's sake things can get better for her since she had a really good run going at Talladega. We talked about that a second ago, but to me, I just really hope that things can get better for her and people stop sending her hateful messages as much as they've had going forward. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Superspeedway racing. Now, over the weekend, especially with the next-gen car and the Cup Series, there was a lot of conversation surrounding Superspeedway racing in the NASCAR Cup Series. And there was a lot of criticism even before the NASCAR Cup Series race took place that was thrown towards Superspeedway racing. Among the people that were very critical of Superspeedway racing were Chris Bell and Kyle Busch. Chris Bell is obviously not a big fan of Superspeedway racing, despite the fact he did win Atlanta Motor Speedway, and sarcastically said that he's a big fan of Superspeedway racing after winning. He said it earlier today on the broadcast as well. He is not a big fan, and he thinks that the Superspeedway package absolutely needs to change because of all the big wrecks that are taking place and also a lot of the gridlock going on as well. Kyle Busch also echoed those comments as well by basically saying that the next-gen car needs a lot of work on the Superspeedways. He says the car does feel good, but he says that the racing just hasn't been that great. He doesn't think the aero changes are going to be making the racing a lot better. They're obviously planning a big aero change on the front of the car to try to prevent cars from flipping upside down. And I don't know if that thing that's going to be implemented at Daytona is really going to work. And obviously many fans like myself were definitely very frustrated with the product earlier today. I think one thing about the next-gen car, we all know the next-gen car races really, really well on intermediates right now. That is the bread and butter of this car. But every other type of track, it does seem like this car does have some flaws. Now, I will say this, the road course racing has improved drastically. I think COTA was a fantastic event, and it was a really, really good race. It was one of the most clean and fun battles. You didn't have a lot of that chaos going on throughout the event, and I think the race itself was generally a really fun and fantastic product. But the two types of tracks where NASCAR's not doing fantastic right now is the short tracks and the super speedways. Now, obviously, the short tracks have been a major focus, and we seem like we were making progress on the short tracks, but then you go to what happened at Bristol, and the racing at Bristol just was terrible with the next-gen car, and it was some of the worst racing I think we have seen in quite some time at Bristol Motor Speedway. Yes, we've had duds in the past, and there's no question on that. But then one other area that's a big issue is Superspeedway racing. Look, I even said it in my video today. I do think the four-wide stuff that we see with the fuel saving, I think aesthetically it actually does look really, really fun. And it does look good. However, it only looks good. It doesn't mean that the racing itself is great because everybody is fuel saving. One of the big issues with the next-gen car is there's a lot of drag in this next-gen car. And the drag is causing a lot of this stuff to really take place where we're seeing a lot of the drag happening where it's very difficult to basically get in front because everyone moves up front, but they're going fuel mileage. The reason they're doing that is so they can save a lot of gas, so then they can go full throttle. But the problem is when you go full throttle, it's gridlock. You're side by side. And it's very much no passing whatsoever. And it hasn't improved in the next-gen car. I think we have to be looking at the Superspeedway racing too. Yes, we do need to focus on short track racing, and I completely understand. I mean, Jeff Gluck had an all-time rant earlier tonight about the All-Star race trying to fix that, and the teams were getting the opportunity to bring what they brought, and the team said no to that, which Denny Hamlin is going to make an explanation on his podcast later today. But I think there has to be a lot of look at the Superspeedway racing too, and I think there's a lot of issues that need to be fixed. One, we got to find a way to stop the fuel saving. There's too much fuel saving in this car. And that's one thing that needs to be fixed. Number two, too much drag in these cars. Too much gridlock. We need to find a way for the cars to be able to make moves. Because, yes, I think this is better than running up on the top lane and just sitting there and fuel saving on the top lane like we used to back in the day and just waiting to make that move. But I really do believe that that is another area we need to be looking at. And Superspeedway racing right now is just, it's not really impossible to watch. I think today's race honestly was okay. And we had an okay finish. But no one can make any moves. I mean, Kyle Larson, William Byron had to sit right behind and no one could move. You're basically at the mercy of the people in front of you. Now, Ryan Preece got disqualified, so Larson technically got second, but they can't make the move because they're gridlocked and you can't make those moves. There needs to be the opportunity to be able to make those passes, and I really hope down the road NASCAR does look at trying to fix Superspeedway side of things, because Superspeedway package is a pretty big problem. There needs to be changes made to the Superspeedway side of things, and I really hope in the future NASCAR is looking at that, because I think that's one area NASCAR needs to look at. There's a lot of issues with it. The fuel saving is a big problem, but there's other issues with the next-gen car at these type of tracks, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Cleetus McFarland once again. So Cleetus McFarland made his second ARCA start this past week in the Talladega Superspeedway and put together a really strong performance where he finished actually inside of the top 10. He survived some of the big crashes, including the last lap of the event, was actually doing very, very well. We talk about the in-car camera stream that he had, of course, on the page of YouTube, starting in the back of the field. But one of the reasons why he was kind of struggling early in the event is because he was having a motor issue early in the event. It turns out a valve spring had kind of broke. I think valve spring number 6 is the one they said, I think, after the race that had broke on the car early in the event. And basically, the engine was definitely losing a lot of ground. He actually would lose the lead pack early in the event. It would nearly go a lap down. But luckily for Cleetus, he would actually stay on the lead lap and would stay up front. And actually, because he had a couple cars right behind him at the end of the event, he was able to stay on the lead lap. There will be the last big crash that took place on the white flag on the one-lap shootout. There was caution coming out around 4 or 5 laps ago, I think, for maybe Cody Dennison, who had a flat tire at that point, and Cleetus would be restarting around 12th position. But then on the ensuing restart, I believe it's Stephen Lewis and a couple guys right in front of him, including Caleb Costner. They would have trouble and issues. They would end up sacking up. Amber Balkin would basically kind of try to go ahead of those guys. She would get clipped. She'd hit the outside wall really, really hard, and a big crash would end up happening. The caution would end up coming out. Originally said Cleetus McFarland had finished 9th, but they basically would end up finishing 10th in the race, picking up his first top 10 in the ARCA series. Considering he had a motor issue in this race, I think that is actually very, very impressive for Cleetus McFarland. And I think he actually did a really good job considering the motor issues that he had. And we know Cleetus is very, very popular. We talked about the in-car stream. 70,000 people tuned into Cleetus McFarland. He was there. He gave a lot of the thoughts. He knew the in-car cameras there. He was providing updates throughout the event. And his interviews are very fun to listen to. And he's a very enjoyable person to listen to as well. To the point where there's a lot of talk right now about other potential possibilities. After the ARCA race had concluded as well, he actually spoke to the media, and he actually revealed during the Fox broadcast as well that it sounds like he might be able to make his NASCAR debut at some point in 2025, where he might be running the fall Talladega race in 2025. Now keep this in mind, ARCA does not run at Talladega in the fall. He is, of course, going to be running the ARCA race at Bristol Motor Speedway on September 11th, which that is a very interesting date to go ahead and run at, but he's going to be someone that could be a factor to maybe get another top 10. That race is generally one of the more wild ARCA races we have every year, but Rhett Jones Racing, they do have very, very solid equipment in ARCA. So I do think that that could be a potential possibility for a top 10, but you're going to have a lot of the ARCA East guys that are going to be there, so it's going to be a really stacked field when they race in the ARCA event. But if he can survive a lot of the carnage and the trouble, considering he does have some experience racing at Bristol Motor Speedway, I think he can be very competitive. But going back to what I just said a second ago, there's interest for him potentially running the race at Talladega in the fall. So again, ARCA is not going to be running there. So what series could it be running? Well, there is, of course, going to be the Truck Series race and the Xfinity Series race as well. You think about the Truck Series, I think he'd absolutely be approved for it too, because he does have experience now at Talladega Superspeedway. He, of course, had experience from Daytona, getting caught up in the wreck, and he's going to have experience in Bristol as well. So he's definitely going to be qualified if he wants to make his NASCAR national debut. I think there's some decent trucks out there, of course. There could be potential possibly some trucks being available. I know Ray Young's probably going to have a race or two available on their schedule for the end of the year, and there might be some other teams that are interested as well. And anything about the Xfinity Series, there's one team that comes to mind that he definitely can make the opportunity with. It's Rhett Jones Racing. Rhett Jones Racing did have some starts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series last year. They just hired Greg Zipadelli. So wouldn't it be interesting if we got the possibility of him maybe running for Rhett Jones Racing? Greg Zipadelli is one of the higher-ups at the program. That would be the team that I'd be thinking would be the most likely option. Again, they ran the Xfinity Series last year with Noah Gragson. Noah ran very, very well, and he showed a lot of really good speed. And we've heard they might make some starts at some point. They were looking to make some starts this year and maybe even have a full-time program. Some have thought maybe Haley Deegan might go there. I'm not sure. But I think Cleetus would be the perfect candidate to make some starts in Xfinity and trucks as well. Because I know Cleetus' long-term goal is to make a run at the Daytona 500. And he's doing what he needs to do. He's keeping his nose clean. He's going through things very thoroughly, and I think he's going to bring a lot of eyes in the sport if he's given that chance and opportunity to make his debut, because Cleetus McFarland, like I've mentioned, he is so popular on social media. When you look at his social media numbers, he is one of the most popular NASCAR drivers out there, ARCA drivers as well. And I think that if he is given that said chance and opportunity to make that Cup debut, or not Cup debut, but Xfinity Trucks, I don't think he's going to get approved for a Cup start at Talladega, but I think an Xfinity and Truck start is definitely possible. And I think that a lot of people would embrace it. People like Christopher Bell, Alex Bowman, William Byron were speaking on him in a very positive manner. And you can tell a lot of people are really big fans of Cleetus. He brings a lot of eyeballs. You look at the ARCA numbers at Daytona earlier this year. I think if you get him in the Xfinity race especially, you're going to make that number probably almost close to the Cup number, because we saw huge numbers for an ARCA race for that matter. And I really hope that we see Cleetus McFarland get the chance and opportunity to make that Cup debut. It sounds like there's not Cup debut, but NASCAR debut. It'd be awesome if it could be with a team like Brett Jones Racing. We'll see if it happens down the road. I really hope they can approve him and maybe get the opportunity to make that NASCAR start at some point in 2025. I want to see it happen. Hopefully it does happen at some point this year. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ryan Preece and Joey Logano. Now, many of you probably saw this last night after the NASCAR Cup Series race concluded at Talladega Superspeedway. But Ryan Preece and Joey Logano originally had crossed the finish line in second place and fifth place, respectively. However, a couple hours later during post-race tech and post-race inspection, both drivers were unfortunately disqualified. Ryan Preece was disqualified because he had spoiler shim issues. You're only allowed to have 2 spoiler shims on the back of the car. He apparently had too many spoiler shims on the back of the car. Apparently they were not meshing like they're supposed to. That's what it sounds like. I'm not entirely sure exactly how the ruling is, but they got disqualified because of the spoiler shims on the back of the car. For Joey Logano, there was a spoiler bolt that was missing on the back of the car that had come loose. They said one of the 18 bolts had come loose on the back of the car, and they were disqualified for that. That's a lot more simpler than the situation with Ryan Preece. Now, the big question is, will these teams approve disqualifications? At the time I'm recording this, RFK has not released a statement if they're going to appeal or not, but there was a statement released earlier tonight by Team Penske, and Team Penske did confirm that yes, there was a situation with one of the bolts on the car. They did confirm they are not going to appeal the disqualification. They do accept the responsibility for having that situation, and they do take accountability for what happened there with the spoiler situation on the spoiler bolt. This is really unfortunate for both of those guys, right? Because both Ryan Preece and Joey Logano had really big highlights in this race. Ryan Preece originally was 22/1000 of a second from picking up the win and beating Austin Cindric. But because of this qualification, he unfortunately does not finish second and finishes 37th in the race. He got a lot of points, I believe, in the stages as well, so he drops to the back. And for Joey Logano, who had not scored a single top 5, and we all thought he was going to get that first top 5 since winning the championship, because of that, he finishes 38th. They both drop positions in the points. Ryan Preece drops from about 15th or 16th down to 18th in the standings, about 10 or 20 points back of the cutoff line. I believe that maybe Kyle Busch is below it as well, and Allmendinger actually moves into the playoff bubble at the moment. Joey Logano drops from about 10th to 11th in the standings and is only up by, I believe, 20 or 30 points above the cutoff line, so Logano cannot have any mistakes. And both had really good runs, too. And I know Ryan Preece is emotional after the race, but now he's really probably upset about it. Now, I do feel terrible for Ryan Preece and Joey Logano, right? Because they're just the two people that they don't work on the cars. They're the ones who get behind the wheel and they drive the race cars. They're not responsible for working on the cars at all. So I do feel for both of them in this situation. But unfortunately, if they violate the rules, they violated the rules. That's the unfortunate situation. And I feel terrible for them because both had earned the really good runs. Logano ran really good in this race, and Ryan Preece ran really good too and was in position to pick up the win. But because of that, it's all for nothing because they finished in the back. For people asking about Austin Cindric, he actually passed post-race inspection, unlike last week where Jesse Love, he failed, and of course they appealed it. Jesse Love did fail a post-race tech, and a win was given to Sammy Smith a couple hours later. So this is now back-to-back weeks where we've had disqualifications. I believe this is around the 5th or 6th disqualification we've had this year, if you combine the two. The first time we've seen 2 in the Cup Series since, I believe, when Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin were disqualified at Pocono back in 2022, and Chase Elliott was declared the winner of the event event. But we have seen a lot of disqualifications this year. So far this year, we have seen, of course, Erik Jones get disqualified at Martinsville for, I think, a spoiler issue, something improper weight, I should say. We also saw Parker Kligerman. They got disqualified after Daytona. After originally winning the race, they were disqualified. And then, of course, the win ended up going over to Corey Heim. They appealed it, and, of course, they lost their appeal. And you think about some of the other ones as well that have happened in recent years. Corey Heim got disqualified for loose lug nuts, 2 or 3 loose lug nuts on the car that was not tightened on there. You also think about, like I said, I believe it was Ryan Blaney at Talladega, or Las Vegas, I should say, in 23. They appealed and they won. Kevin Harvick was disqualified in 23 at Talladega Superspeedway. So I believe the first time since 23 at Talladega we've seen a disqualification. But I feel for those two guys. But big change has happened here. Kyle Larson moves up and finishes in second. William Byron goes up to third. Chase Elliott actually moves inside the top 5. And Alex Bowman moves up inside, I believe, the top 10 in 7th position. So all 4 Hendrick cars finish in the top 7. Carson Osborne moves up to 6th. Alex Bowman goes up to 8th. Not Alex Bowman. Bubba Wallace moves up to 8th position. Daniel Suarez actually finishes 9th, originally across the line in 11th. He moves up to 9th position. And there were some other changes as well that happened throughout the field. Shane Van Gisbergen got a top 30. Hang the banner. Kyle Busch, I believe, finished in 26th or 27th after having his issues throughout the day. And despite the fact that Brad Keselowski and Ryan Blaney, those guys ended up crashing out and finishing in the back, they finished ahead of 2 guys that were disqualified. Again, we're just going to have to wait and see what happens at RFK on their appeal side of things. And it probably is going to be an explanation later this week, depending on what happens. I would think maybe RFK will appeal. They did appeal, of course, Brad Keselowski's big L2 penalty, I believe, back in 2022 at Atlanta early in the year, which was the first big penalty we saw in the next-gen car. So we'll have to wait and see if they do go ahead and appeal it. But like I said, I feel terrible for both these guys. Really, Ryan Preece, because Ryan Preece was so close to getting that win. I really thought he was going to go to victory lane, and unfortunately, because of something that he has no control over, and the team was probably messing with it in some way, shape, or form, that unfortunately cost him a shot at picking up the win. And it sucks for him because I know Ryan Preece wanted to get the victory. He came very close to getting it done, and now he has nothing to show for it. Instead of having 2 top 5s unless he wins his appeal, of course, he's only got 1 top 5 this year, and which is still tied for the most he's had in the season. So I feel bad for both these guys. I feel bad for them in this situation. Again, I understand rules are rules, but I hate sometimes that the rules have to be enforced in some situations for some guys because, again, look, I do think that Ryan Preece, if you did truly cheat, and I think there's definitely a chance they did cheat in this situation, they then probably got the call right. But at the same token, at the same time, we've been seeing a lot of disqualifications pop up this year. You think about Justin Bonzino as well for the lug nuts. We're very close tying the record. I believe Seth Egger reported that there's been 6, or the record is 7 in a single year. I look back in 1960, he had like 6 disqualifications for pit road improper procedures, I'm pretty sure, like 65 years ago. But we've only been seeing a few of them in recent years, and it's kind of crazy that the number continues to go up every single year. I think we are going to have a record because we've had a lot more this year. It seems like it's becoming a weekly thing, and it wouldn't surprise me or shock me after the race at Texas if we got some sort of disqualification. So when I'm mistaken, the Xfinity Series, didn't Kyle Busch get disqualified a few years ago, and Austin Hendrick was declared the winner in 20 or 21, I'm pretty sure. So maybe we'll see some sort of disqualification later this week. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. But big deal nonetheless for sure, and disappointing here the situation there. But again, rules are rules, and you have to follow the rules in these situations. So, that is going to be today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about a DQ between Ryan Preece and Joey Logano? Think the call was right or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Cleetus McFarland and maybe making his NASCAR national debut at some point in the future? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If any major news breaks later today, we'll discuss it live on the channel. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to be having the truck race picks for the race at Texas. We're also going to have the entry list for the Cup race at Texas. I think they changed the names, I'm pretty sure. Then Wednesday, we're going to have a NASCAR news video and the Xfinity picks for Texas. And then on Thursday, we'll have Cup race picks for Texas and the paint scheme video as well. Friday, we should have a NASCAR news video. Might do a truck review, not entirely sure, so I got to work on Friday. Saturday, there should be an Xfinity review, and Sunday, there will not be a full-scale Cup review, as I will be working that day. So maybe the race will be good. I'm not entirely sure, though, but we've got a lot of racing going on. Of course, we've got Formula 1. We've got IndyCar as well, Miami Grand Prix, and the race at Barber. Content coming out, people like Haley Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Cards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Connor Zilisch, Jr. Motorsports, KSI, Logan Paul, Donald Trump, all the good stuff. Prime, all the good stuff we'll be talking about on the channel in the coming days and weeks. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.